Mortal Kombat 1 is probably the strangest and most divisive entry in the entire series next to its predecessor, MK11. Now obviously with this game, there was clearly an intent from the developers to make it something new and different. You can tell from the title. MKX, that sounds cool. MK11 kinda sounds cooler, like it's being dialed up to 11. But I think they kinda knew that MK12 would just make people think, wow, this series is way too long. But I think in going with Mortal Kombat 1, the intent kinda folds in on itself. You have people expecting something new, exciting, and fresh. And that is not what we get in this game. We'll start with the roster, as this is a Mortal Kombat game. It's problematic at best. The biggest and most glaring change for this game is the cameo system, which if you've played the previous Mortal Kombat or Injustice 2, we've kind of already had for a while. It was something present in both the multiverse system and the Towers of Time in those games, only now you can use it in co-op and online play, but can't turn it off. Now, don't get me wrong, this is a well-made and thought-out system. Even if some people don't like it, it's well-made and not lazily done. You can even level up cameo characters to add another level of progression in this game. In fact, this game is a lot more generous with progression and earning shaders, gear, and stuff like that. If you play more with a character, there is a set level-up system that will give you more gear, and then you can earn bonus stuff through currency and certain challenges. This is good. You're already making people pay $70 for the base game and then like $40 for the combat pack. Having a currency system on top of that is kind of dicey, but I don't hate the way this game does it. It's kind of the least insulting from this type of game, but the roster itself is kind of a problem. By the way, this is your reminder to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. See, I thought that Mortal Kombat was starting to run out of villains in the last game. It felt like most of the characters were good and then like a couple were villains. And all of the fights in the story mostly came from misunderstandings or just making good characters stupid for a bit. In this game, pretty much everyone's a good guy. If you actually look at the roster without the DLC characters, only 7 fighters can confidently be called antagonists who are against the heroes. There are 16 characters on the good side. Over 2/3 of the entire roster can be considered good guys. I usually like when characters are made good over the course of a series, like a redemption, but in this case it's literally just a reboot/rewrite, and it's incredibly one-sided. Couldn't it have been cooler if some of the heroes were turned into villains like Kenshi or Johnny Cage? Bad examples, but you get my point. I like good guy Baraka and Syzoth as much as the next person, but it's not helping the game when we fight the same couple of fighters for over half the story. Although I will grant the example of this done extremely well as Geras. I like his character in the story much more than the last game. But Mortal Kombat and NetherRealm games have struggled for a while to keep characters relevant before or after their given chapter. For example, Cassie Cage is the first chapter of MK11 and you see her like 3 more times across the entire story. In this game, it's much the same with Kung Lao, Syzoth, and even Baraka doesn't do much past his chapter. And then there's the characters that don't even get a chapter, like Smoke, who is in my opinion a member of this roster that got shafted the hardest in the entire game next to Ashra, despite everyone wanting more of him. In Injustice, you don't see Green Arrow or Black Canary more than once after their chapter. Flash kinda disappears, Atrocitus is in the story a singular time, as is Joker. And like in Injustice 2, there are just characters who shouldn't be in this game, like Ashra, Natara, and Darius. But back to this game. The story is also a point of contention for a lot of people. Quite a bit in this game is sacrificed by what's currently happening in the story versus what's desired in the gameplay. For example, Scorpion and Raiden both have elementals as their cameos, even though it makes 0 sense and is never mentioned in the story. Kenshi's moveset in his chapter is butchered because he doesn't have the spiritual force in his sword yet, so he doesn't even have a fatal blow. Neither does Mileena for most of her chapter. You fight Quan Chi before he's added as a DLC character, so you can tell his moveset's unfinished, as such with Ermac. Some of these issues could be fixed by changing the timing of the chapters, like playing as Kenshi during Ashra's chapter, so half of his chapter would be without the spirits and half with. But a lot of them are just messily done while still kind of having to be the way they are. But I think the worst part of the story is how it connects with the last game. Like, the last game really doesn't matter until the final 3 chapters. Obviously the Titan Shang Tsung is the catalyst for the story and stuff, but the conflict of the story is set in this universe, with most of the characters not knowing about the previous timeline until the end. But the end is still kind of the worst part. I think Liu Kang's chapter is pretty cool. It's a good farewell to the old timeline's characters, and it feels like we get a chance to revisit them while saving the hourglass. But then the Armageddon chapter rolls up. I love the idea of this in concept, but it just doesn't work in practice. First of all, there is -0 emotional payoff to the entire story in this chapter. Yes, you get to choose the character who saves the multiverse, but it's not a character from the timeline we've been witnessing the entire game. It's just a version of them. So the characters you've been growing semi-attached to across the entire game, you can't even play as them at the end. It's made even worse because the fights themselves are all gimmicks or joke fights, so no one playing through the final chapter can even take it seriously. Even though this is literally the biggest fight in Mortal Kombat history, none of the fights feel like they're taken seriously as the finale of the game. Even the cutscenes between each one are shoddily done and go from in-game where you can see your character to pre-rendered where it's the same for everyone. I'm not saying that this idea is intrinsically flawed at all, and when I first heard about it I thought, great, we're finally getting a final battle that's not the same one as the last few games. But it was probably done in the laziest, shoddiest way possible. If I could change just one thing, at least just make it so that each character has more than 3 lines of dialogue for the entire chapter. I know that's a lot of work from the development side, but I think it would have been worth it to just put the extra work in, especially because it's the final chapter. It's just the most disappointing ending I've seen in a NetherRealm game that I've personally played. Why do I care if Kenshi loses his sight or Ashra sheds her demon ways if it ends up not mattering in the end anyway? I can't think of a single thing Ashra does past her chapter. I understand that the format these NetherRealm story modes are in is holding them back, and I think everyone else does too. Except for the studio. If you really wanted to revitalize your game, you should have started from the ground up. A lot of the changes, like the cameo system and the reboot of the timeline, are cool for like the first 10 minutes that you experience them, but they really fall flat as time goes on. But it's not all bad. I think the best thing about this reboot is that because it's kind of a restart, it's not that hard for people to follow the story, because they're reintroducing a lot of concepts all over again. It's really not safe to say if they'll do another reboot in the next game because they just did like 2 in a row, but if they don't, and this is the new concurrent story indefinitely, it's definitely not bad as a storyline. I think they're setting things up well with the way they treat Outworld and Earthrealm, and the fact that they don't show us other realms yet to kind of save them for later, a la God of War 2018. And while NetherRealm games usually struggle to get people emotionally invested, outside of the end, this game actually isn't bad at getting you to care about the characters. You feel something when Smoke is treated poorly by Sub-Zero, or when Johnny Cage gives Sento to Kenshi, or even when Li Mei is forgiven by Sindel for Jared's death. Granted, these are very basic emotional charges. This is like the bare minimum for most game stories, but it is refreshing to see that Mortal Kombat is taking emotional connections with characters a bit more seriously. I don't think most people really cared when Quintana became Khan in MK11, especially when the ending of that game disregards everything that happened previously anyway, and because we hadn't even seen her since MK9 and the role of Khan was literally invented for that game. But still, you gotta give credit for making us care about the characters beyond just liking them for what abilities or lore they may have. Sub-Zero is my favorite character ability-wise, but I'm much more inclined to be invested in Scorpion's story, at least in this game. And I think an even larger proponent of caring about the characters is the voice acting of the cast, which is actually very good. I don't think it's ever been particularly bad in previous games, but I think it's particularly good here. I mean, I can't think of a particularly weak performance at all, except that I think some of the roles were miscast. I love Yuri Lowenthal, but Smoke isn't even a playable character in the story, and I just don't know that Yuri's voice was right for it. I know why Raiden was recast, but I still miss his old voice. And then, Nitara. Someone didn't learn their lesson after Sonya Blade in MK11, and it definitely shows. By the way, this is your reminder to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. Again. Back to the game itself, there's obviously stuff that isn't story, but it feels a bit more bare bones than other Mortal Kombat games. First and foremost is the Invasions mode, which I really do not like. On the one hand, it's a really easy way to keep updating the game and giving people reasons to keep coming back and grinding. On the other hand, it's probably the most annoying grind I've ever seen in my entire life. First of all, running around each map is too slow even with the speed boost. There's no overhead map, so it's easy to become misguided. The maps are just too big and take too long to complete in general. I'd rather have a ton of maps that are like a quarter of the size rather than the number that we have as big as they are. That said, Invasions is pretty much just a Towers of Time remake, but with less sauce. It allows a lot less choice for progression than just exploring the map, whereas the Towers of Time had a ton of different options and character towers, so you could literally grind a single character of your choice rather than waiting on another tower to offer gear for a character you want. It's basically a better multiverse system than Injustice 2. In this game, we do not get that at all. Now, technically everything you do with a character levels up that character, so when I play Invasions as Omni-Man or Sub-Zero, I get gear for other characters as I progress, but I also level up the character I'm using. So it's a combination of both, which is actually pretty good. Only one problem: I don't really like Invasions and I don't want to play it. And also, there's not really anything to do outside of Invasions. Like, at all. I'm not kidding. Yes, there's obviously online and co-op stuff that you can do, but this game just offers so little content for offline players that it's a little bit insulting. The last couple of games gave you choices. In MKX, you could choose a clan to align with for weekly challenges online. In MK11, the Towers of Time were plentiful and a decent grind. For MK1, you have the story and Invasions. That's it. Sorry, no, you also have the dragon offering pedestal as another form of currency that's not time crystals. I actually don't mind it because you kinda just earn coins without even having to grind them, and the rewards from the dragon pedestal are cool, but not really worth grinding for days over. But that's it. That's all this game has to offer past story. And we as players are left wondering, where's the new that we were promised before the game came out? The story mode doesn't do that much that's interesting, and in fact, this story is so parallel with the previous one that it's almost comical. Like, think about it. Liu Kang spends unthinkable amounts of time shaping a new universe, and he really couldn't dream one up without a Mortal Kombat tournament. Isn't that like the first thing that you should be changing? I know we wouldn't have a game without it, but I don't think it'd be that hard to come up with some excuse for why Liu Kang couldn't get rid of it. As it stands, he could have written all the bad guys out of existence. He could have made it so that Tarkot as a disease didn't exist, and he chose not to, so Mileena would be an interesting character to play as. But I digress. Here we are yet again. After all the reveals, after most of the Kombat pack has been released, here we are again with just another Mortal Kombat game. It's kinda sad that we were all waiting for the new innovations that the studio and Ed Boon had promised, and then here we are. We really didn't know just how samey it was going to be. It's not a bad game, it's not a bad Mortal Kombat game, but it's also not what we were told it would be. It doesn't live up to the hype in pretty much any way, and that makes it hurt a lot more. I genuinely love Mortal Kombat and its characters, but I don't even know who those characters are anymore in this new timeline. To change so much and yet so little is probably the worst decision made behind this game. But like I said, it's not bad. I'll probably play it in the future. The Kombat pack is actually pretty cool for Omni-Man and Homelander fans, but still, I'm excited to see where they take things in this new universe, and we'll see if Mortal Kombat can turn things around. If not, I'm not completely positive that this series will survive another game that's constructed this poorly. That said, I think this gets a 6.5 out of 10. It's disappointing. It's not a terrible score, but I truly believe with a few changes, this could have been the best Mortal Kombat yet. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. I'd really appreciate it. Also, make sure to comment your favorite character. I am curious about what other players find cool about a character. Or not, that's fine. Play nice, people.